but there are very egregious stories out there, and I talk to a lot of people in the family courts, and that are dealing with this stuff, and it's beyond the pale. It happens a lot. It happens a lot in the United States, all over the place. I find
Hmm.
out it happens a lot more in in for wealthy urban and suburban areas than most places. I'm hesitant to say blue states, but there's it tends to be, states like New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Virginia, Illinois,
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania, California. These are the places where you see these family courts really, really happening. Like Mike Volpe, who I have a podcast, the Unknown Podcast. He's my podcast mate. He's a family court writer, investigative journalist as well, and he's in Chicago. And he just, one of the big people he focuses on is Bierman LLP, and they're a factory. They're a family court factory. They control the family courts in Cook County, Chicago, and the adjoining counties, and it's just a fraudulent business model is the best way I can put it. And I've been working with Dave Weigel, Family Court Fraud
Hmm.
Warrior. He is and that's what he coined that. He said, "Look, I'm a Wall Street guy. I'm a top fixed income manager. I look at businesses, and look at financials for a living. I have to understand the business model, and the business model of the family courts is fraud. That's what the
Hmm.
business model of the family courts are. And there's nowhere where else that the operation could run the way the family court runs with absent fraud. And it's a situation where it's a real it's about the money. You follow the money, and you get to your solution there. So, and I'll talk a little bit about Family Court Fraud Warrior. David has the Family Court Fraud Warrior Project, and the Family Court Fraud Warrior Project is one where we're trying to create awareness. We're trying to create a group that we can get together and bring our voices together to show the establishment, the family court establishment, that you cannot continue this divide and conquer and isolate and traumatize. And
Hmm.
so what we're doing with David is David's taking what he does for a living, quantitative analysis, and he's using that as the backbone to show the fraud in family courts. So he can take different papers and using AI and look at, and we can find just basic quantitative analysis. And I'll give you the simplest most basic thing. You put all your paperwork through, the transcripts of all your proceedings through, and we get a breakdown. We get a scorecard. And one of
Hmm.
the metrics on the scorecard is how much did each party speak? How much did the one parent speak as opposed to the other? If you have a pro se parent, especially versus one that's represented by counsel, how much did the judge speak? A lot of these cases, you see, the judge speaks maybe 25% of the time. You'll have the other attorney will speak, 50, 60, 70% of the time. Sometimes you have the parent, if they're pro se, especially speak maybe 10% of the time. They're in single digits. So when you talk about, constitutional rights, you talk about the opportunity to be heard. Is that really an opportunity to be heard when you have an adversary that speaks, 10 times as much as you do?
Right.
It's a little bit. So that's a very basic example, very simple example of what quantitative analysis can do. And there's a lot more sophisticated stuff that David and the Family Court Fraud Warrior Project are doing. But that is one of the things that he's doing over there. And he also has a My 3 Minute campaign that he just launched,
Hmm.
where you give your 3 minutes about family court.
Hmm.
Take the camera, turn it around on yourself, and give a 3 minute. Just your feelings. What happened to you? Tell your story in 3 minutes, and then upload it. Upload it to Instagram. Upload it to social media. Tag it My 3 minutes, and we're going to and send it along to David at familyfraudwarrior.com, and he's going to be coordinating the group
Hmm.
to all these different stories. The big issue, what he's trying to do, what several others with him are trying to do, is I think we have a moment in history that is unprecedented with respect to government change. And one of the drivers of the family courts in the United States is the Title 4D and 4E money. And that's the Violence Against Women Act. And that is a driver because a lot of these states receive their family court money because of the federal money. That's where they get. That's where they basically cover their budgets, shortfalls and everything else. And if you look at 4D and 4E, it motivates a domestic violence finding, or it motivates a domestic violence type framework in almost every case, so that that money becomes available, or so that the court systems can make the case for the need for that money. And what that does is that is the type of situation that promotes, the intervention of the criminal justice system, which doesn't help anybody, and
Mhm.
it promotes the silver bullets, which we see
Mhm.
in family law
Oh yeah.
cases all the time. It promotes all this extraneous stuff that takes away from resolving family issues, resolving the matrimonial matter, resolving the child custody matters, and it creates additional drama and additional need for a court appointed. Court appointed
Mhm.
this, court appointed that, court appointed this, court appointed that. And that's part of the fraud model that David has tapped into. But we're at a time where the government, and when just yesterday and today, and you turn on the news, Elon Musk, Doge, they're cutting crazy stuff in the federal budget. Well, if you look at the multiplier of what the 4D and 4E funds alone have done to the family courts across the country, the case makes itself why that money should be cut to a certain extent. Now, there are points where that money is important. There are points where the initial intent of the Violence Against Women Act and it makes sense. You have to protect people who are victimized, but it's
Mhm.
not out of control. It's out
Right.
of control.
And also, Richard, I also through my podcast, I learned that CPS is involved with these domestic violence shelters. So they're also aiding and abetting this Title IV D and E.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So it's a one big web. It's a gigantic web.
Mhm.
You have the shelters. You have all these different non-for-profits. You have these different sub-governmental entities, governmental entities that are involved. And it's a big feeding trough. And the problem is, and I'll go back to Judge Judy. The problem
Mhm.
is, if you got a good judge, you can pull everybody into a courtroom and get a case resolved in an hour. I really feel that it's about the judge. If you got a good judge and you can cut through the bullshit in plain English, then you can get to now there are cases that are tough cases, and that's true. But I think 90% of the cases can be resolved if you take the drama, you take that. But that's what feeds these lawyers. That's
Mhm.
it's the Kramer versus Kramer type, cottage business, the divorce industrial complex, as some call it. That's happened after when divorce became a thing back in the 70s. Well,
Mhm.
now everybody's divorce is Kramer versus Kramer. Everybody's divorce is the Woody Allen divorce, Woody Allen Mia Farrow. Everybody's divorce becomes that. The divorce becomes big business, and why are we at that point? Does it do anything to help anybody? Does it help the children? Does it do anything but traumatize them? Does it hurt the families? Yes. All it does is it's paying lawyers and court appointeds and everything else. So we have to see. I think that obviously lawyers. There's a time for lawyers to be there and to make money and to do what they do, and they provide a great service in a certain circumstances. But the churn becomes the problem. You have
Mhm.
people that are in divorce cases that are carried out for years and years and years, and the families spend millions. And the problem is that if the second that they run out of money, the case tends to resolve itself magically. You'll see that in courts. As soon as the both sides say we have no more money, you can't bleed us anymore, then they find a way to resolve the case. So it's just and that's the fraudulent model. I've been doing great work also, and I mentioned her before. It was Jill Jones Soderman at the Foundation for the Child Victims of the Family Courts. She's the expert that I spoke about before. That they've tried to deny her, even though she's and this woman is a phenomenal woman. She founded the foundation. And she's been doing this work for decades, and she has just a wealth of knowledge on family court issues and trauma from a clinical perspective. She worked with some great people like Dr. Bandy Lee, who
Mhm.
is just a well accomplished and brilliant woman with respect to um, understanding domestic violence, understanding so many different areas. So she's a brilliant psychiatrist, and she has an excellent team over there. Theo Chino, who
Yeah.
Theo, who helps out over there with looking at billing fraud and excessive billing with some of these attorneys. But there's a good group that she has over there, and so that's another group that I've been doing some good work with, and she's given me some egregious stories in the family courts and pointed me in that direction. So
Hmm.
she's been an excellent partner in trying to get to the bottom of the corruption. And the problem is that as soon as you start to try to tackle the corruption, you get tagged as a judge hunter, or you get tagged as disruptor, and that's the way. There's only a few of us that are out there that are covering the family courts in earnest.
Hmm.
Um, but the second the judge sees one of us walk in, and we kind of travel together in packs. I have Julie Holborn out in California, and she's running into a problem right now where because of the fact that she is questioning what's happening in a case. So she tried to question witnesses, expert witnesses, parties, everything else. The judge wants to know who spoke to this journalist, who leaked this information. Which we have a First Amendment. I asked Julie. I said, Julie, when exactly did California become part of the Soviet Union? Can you give me
Yeah.
the So it was it's one of those things where and so I might just start covering this case for that reason. Because we have to stick together in the press. If they try to exclude, one of us, that means they exclude all of us.
Hmm.
So we have that alive with Mike Volpe, with cases like that. Frank Parlato too. He's done a
Hmm.
lot of great work on the family courts. And so there's so many that cover this and the related areas with respect to the courts. So.
Right. And a lot of people don't know anything about this until they end up going through it themselves. Then they're shocked.
Nobody would believe the abyss that you could fall in
Hmm.
family court, and it's kind of the same playbook every time. And it's a shame too, because you have people who sometimes you have people who are they're doing well and they go through a divorce and they manage to keep it together and they get out of it, and you take some scratches, you take some scars, but you get through. And then there are other people that just never recover. They get thrown into a divorce and that derails them for the rest of their life. And it
Hmm.
becomes a real problem. And that's, I think, what we need to look at. I think we need to look at more of a therapeutic jurisprudence. I think we need to look at, what is the law, as a non-therapeutic agent, especially in the family courts. If any court should be a court that wants to worry about therapeutic outcomes and mental health
Hmm.
outcomes and holistic uh, outcomes, it would be a family.
Right.
And I think that's something that really needs to be taken into consideration, that's not being done right now.
Right. I think these lawyers are ignoring the ACEs score. A lot of these lawyers are instigating the fighting between the parents. And they're also child psychological abusers, at least the lawyers I was dealing with.
Yeah, without question. I'll give you a perfect example. I know someone who's in a custody battle right now, and when the child's with the father's so crazy and controlling that if she calls from a blocked number because he doesn't want her to have him to have her number, she won't let the son pick up. And she says it's for the child's safety. He can't pick up the block number to give it to the son. Well, the lawyer for the father is parroting this crazy idea in the court. When you think about it, oh, it's a block number, and therefore for the child's safety, she cannot call from a blocked number. What, are you kidding me? Are you like a 3-year-old? The argument doesn't make any sense. You pick up
Mm,
back in the old days, we didn't have a caller ID. The phone would ring, you'd pick it up, you'd say, "Hello, who is this?" And
yeah.
the sad part is these judges entertain this crap, and that's
Yes.
part of the issue. You think that if you think that's why I like the Judge Judy test. You
Hmm.
think that if you brought that in front of Judge Judy, well, it's a restricted number that came in, and we have to be sure that what's going to happen if the call is from a restricted number. You think that would pass the Judge Judy test? Come on. And that's some of the issues that we have in the family court. And the lawyers make mountains out of molehills, and
Hmm.
the mountains they've made out of molehills turn into real problems because of the trauma that's
Oh,
close to the children. And they're the ones who are the separators. They're the ones who are moving the children around. They're the ones and the courts are the ones that are trafficking the children to the highest bidder. Which parent can pay the bill? I have plenty of cases I could talk about. Karen Riordan in Connecticut in the Christopher Ambrose case. That case was egregious, and you have a guy who's a wealthy Connecticut blue blood, basically, who has a law degree, and you have this poor woman who was a teacher, and she was railroaded by the Connecticut establishment and the courts. Finally, the first child, Mia, the eldest, just aged out. She just turned 18, and she's out of harm's way as far as Christopher Ambrose is concerned. But there's still two other kids, right?
Mhm.
And that becomes the issue: is the age out. That's the only way out of these courts in a lot of circumstances. We see this in Chicago in the Girard case. Gwen and Grace Girard. They're about to age out in their case, and that's the one that I said with the Bierman firm and just some egregious things happening in that case. But the Judge Fernandez just recused herself. She's probably the fifth or sixth or seventh judge in this case that's left because they don't want to be involved in the corruption. They don't want to be brought in. There's a federal RICO case there, and now the strategy is hopefully the girls age out. And that becomes the strategy. They got to hit 18. It's kind of like the old days where you're running for the state lines. If I get to the state lines, then they're not going to be able to get me. If I hit 18 years old, and when you think about that, what was that? The state lines. That was a lot. That was slavery, right? That was the antebellum South. That was the Fugitive Slave Act. That was some of those other issues in America where if you got to a certain state or you got to a certain place, you'd be okay, and you weren't okay. That's where we're at. We have almost a really scary system in the family courts where they take control over you. They take control over your life. I have plenty of people that say, look, I wish that they would charge me with a crime and I'd go to criminal court because then at least I know I would have rights.
I'm glad I had you on to speak out, and I'm still speaking out. And I'm glad Dave Weigel is speaking out, and others. This has got to stop.
It's a battle. And the problem is that we all have certain levels of trauma, right? We all have certain levels. Some people, and people react differently to trauma. Guys like me and Dave, they try to throw trauma at us. We try to throw it right back at them. We'll be the ones out in the front of the courthouse trying to fight people. But other people internalize it, and then they're damaged in a different way, in a way. And so that's the problem. When you deal with trauma, it's about understanding that first and foremost. Because until you handle your own trauma and understand what's going on and process that, then you really can't be effective. And that's part of their game. Their game is to throw so much at you that you're not able to effectively combat them. They're misery merchants. And that's part of what Dave's trying to do, and what Jill Jones Soderman and so many others, and you and so many others are speaking out that are trying to get people past that first step, of trauma. Try to get out of the way of the misery and be able to deal with it, to be able to manage that, to be able to achieve goals. And that's the first step, I think, and it's the most important one.
Oh, definitely. Because after I left family court, I went into federal court. And then after that, I started this podcast in 2020. So I just took everything that I had the, I don't know what you want to call it, anger, upset. I just put it into trying to help other people since they took away my career as a nurse. I thought this is the way I can help people. This is going to have to be it.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
You're doing a great job.
Oh, well, thank you. So are you. Yeah, I'd love to have you back on again. How can people contact you if they have any questions?
Behind me right here, I'll dunk for a second. They can look. It's luthmann.substack.com. That's my publication on Substack. I have a couple other little websites, but from there you can get to everything. And on there you would have my email address, which is richard.luthmann, Luthmann with two N's, at protonmail.com. You can email me there with with tips or stories or just general inquiries. But yeah, and you can get there through Substack too. You can leave messages on Substack. I try to write prolifically. I try to put stuff out all the time on different issues, and I have several different verticals. So if you want to read the family court stuff, that's great. If you want to read some of the other stuff, that's great too. And yeah, so that's what I have going on.
Oh, I appreciate you for coming on. I could talk to you all day. But hey, don't jump off, okay? Slam the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these courtrooms. I'm your host, Maryann Petri. You can find me on Spotify, YouTube. Please like and subscribe, Apple iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google, and other platforms I don't know about. Again, feel free to buy me a coffee to help keep this podcast going. Thank you so much, Richard Luthmann, for explaining all of this, and I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much.